My name is Laura. For 8 years, I thought I knew everything about my husband, his habits, his dreams, his family. We built a quiet life together, steady and safe, or so I thought. Every month, without fail, Mark would send money to his sister. He said she was struggling, that it was family duty. I never questioned it. I trusted him, because that's what love does, right? But one day, one ordinary day, I decided to meet her, and that day changed everything. What I discovered wasn't just about money, it was about secrets, about love twisted by guilt, and about the kind of forgiveness that doesn't come easy, the kind that nearly broke me before it set me free. Pause. Music softens. This is my story. The story of how I lost trust, found truth, and learned that sometimes the person you have to forgive most is yourself. Music swells slightly, fades out. Every month my husband sent money to his sister until the day I met her. A true story about love, betrayal, and the power of forgiveness. My name is Laura Bennett, and I thought I knew everything about my husband, Mark. We had been married for 9 years, not perfect, but comfortable. You know that kind of marriage where the spark isn't fireworks anymore, but a steady candlelight? That was us. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our quiet mornings over coffee. But every month, without fail, on the first Friday, Mark would sit at the kitchen table with his laptop and transfer money to his sister, Anna. He never missed it. It didn't matter if we were behind on bills or if the car needed repairs. That transfer always went through. At first, I didn't question it. I knew Mark's parents had passed when he was young, and Anna had practically raised him. It made sense that he felt protective of her. But over the years, something about it started to bother me. Anna never called. She never visited. I'd never even met her, not once, in almost a decade of marriage. When I asked about her, Mark would shrug and say, "She's private. She doesn't like to talk about the past." I wanted to believe him. I really did. There was this one night, maybe 4 years into our marriage, when I tried again. We were sitting on the couch watching TV, and I said, "Mark, why doesn't Anna ever come around? Doesn't she want to meet me?" He sighed, rubbed his face, and said, "She's had a rough life, Laura. She doesn't trust people easily. I don't want to pressure her." That was the end of it. He changed the channel, kissed my forehead, and I told myself to stop being nosy. But something inside me, call it intuition, or maybe just that quiet voice women get when something doesn't add up, wouldn't let it go. The years rolled by. We moved houses, we got a new car, but the payments never stopped. Once, when Mark forgot to close his laptop, I saw the amount, $2,000. That wasn't helping your sister, that was supporting her life. Still, I said nothing. I told myself I was being paranoid, that love meant trust. But trust started to feel like a tightrope I was walking alone. Then came the morning everything started to shift. It was a Saturday in early May. Mark had gone to his friend's cabin for a weekend fishing trip, and I was cleaning the house. When I picked up his jacket from the chair, an envelope fell out. Inside was a piece of mail, a folded letter with Anna Miller printed neatly on it. The address was only 2 hours away. I just stared at it for the longest time. My hands were shaking. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was years of suppressed curiosity, or maybe just the ache of wanting to finally see the woman who had such a hold over my husband's heart. Before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed my keys. The drive felt endless. Every mile was another question piling up in my head. What would she be like? Was she sick? Was she poor? Why had she never called me? I rehearsed a dozen polite ways to introduce myself. "Hi, I'm Laura, Mark's wife." Or maybe, "I just wanted to drop off something for you." But when I turned onto that quiet suburban street, my stomach twisted. The houses were beautiful. Big porches, trimmed lawns, kids' bikes on the driveways. Not exactly what I imagined for someone who needed financial help every month. When I pulled up to the address, I froze. A little boy was playing on the front lawn, tossing a red ball in the air. He couldn't have been older than 6, and when he looked up at me, I swear to God, I saw Mark's eyes. The same hazel color, the same way they squinted when he smiled. My breath caught in my throat. The door opened, and a woman stepped out. She was in her mid-30s, with long brown hair and a soft voice as she called out, "Jamie, don't throw it near the street." She turned to me then, noticing my car, and for a moment, our eyes met. There was something strange in her expression. Recognition? Guilt? Fear? I couldn't tell. I wanted to drive away. I should have, but my heart wouldn't let me. I got out of the car. "Hi," I said, trying to sound casual. "I'm looking for Anna Miller." She hesitated. "That's me." "I'm Laura. Laura Bennett, Mark's wife." Her face went pale. For a few seconds, we just stood there, the breeze rustling the trees, her son clutching the red ball, my heart pounding so hard I could barely hear. Then she whispered, "Oh, God." Her knees wobbled, and she sat down on the porch step, covering her mouth. I didn't know what to say. Every line I had rehearsed disappeared. "I just wanted to meet you," I said softly. "Mark always said you were family." I thought it was time. Her eyes filled with tears. "He told you I was his sister?" That sentence, that one small question, shattered my entire world. She wasn't his sister. I didn't need her to say more. I could see it in her face. I could see it in that little boy's eyes. Everything I had ignored, every instinct I'd silenced, every excuse I'd made for Mark. It all crashed down in one unbearable moment. I stood there, unable to move, unable to breathe. Anna looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "I never wanted this. I told him to tell you. I begged him to." I turned away. I couldn't hear another word. I got in my car and drove, the world spinning around me in a blur of pain and disbelief. That night, Mark came home. He smelled like lake water and smoke, smiling as he dropped his duffel bag by the door. "Hey, honey, how was your day?" I just looked at him. He noticed my silence, frowned. "What's wrong?" I asked quietly. "How's your sister?" He blinked. "She's fine." "Why?" That was the last lie. I said, "Because I met her today." His face drained of color. The room fell into a silence so heavy it felt alive. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. And in that silence, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. I don't know how long we stood there, me by the kitchen counter, him by the door, both frozen, both knowing there was no way back from what I'd just said. When I finally spoke, my voice didn't sound like mine. It was steady, too steady. "I met Anna today," I said. "She's not your sister." He flinched like I'd hit him. Then he looked down, pressing his hands to his face. "Laura, please, just let me explain." I didn't move. I didn't cry. I just watched him. This man I'd loved for 9 years, a man who suddenly felt like a stranger standing in my kitchen. "How long?" I asked. He hesitated, then whispered, "Before you and I met." "And the boy?" I said, my throat tight. His silence told me everything. I thought I'd scream, throw something, demand answers. But instead, I just stood there, feeling this deep, cold ache spread through me. "Why did you lie?" I finally asked. "Why not just tell me the truth?" He took a slow breath. "Because I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Of losing you," he said quietly. "Of you walking away before I could explain." "Explain what, Mark?" I snapped. "That you have another family? That every month you send money to a woman and a child who look just like you? What could possibly explain that?" He ran a hand through his hair, his voice breaking. "Anna and we were never married. It was years before I met you. I was young, stupid, and scared. When she got pregnant, I panicked. I wasn't ready to be a father. I left." He looked at me then, eyes red, desperate. "I tried to make it right later, but by then, she didn't want me around. She only asked for one thing, to help support them, So I did. Every month. I never missed a payment. He took a shaky breath. When I met you, Laura, I told myself I'd tell you one day. But then life got good. You made me happy. And every time I thought about bringing it up, I just couldn't. I didn't want to ruin what we had. I felt my legs go weak, and I sat down slowly at the table. He knelt across from me, his eyes searching mine. I swear to you, there was never anything between us after you and I got married. It's not about love anymore. It's about responsibility. That word echoed in my head, sharp and hollow. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. But 9 years of lies doesn't just disappear with one confession. I whispered, "You've been lying to me our entire marriage." He didn't deny it. He just nodded, his jaw tight with shame. "I'm sorry," he said. "You can hate me. You can walk out that door. I deserve it. But please believe me, I never meant to hurt you." The next few days were a blur. I didn't leave, but I didn't talk much either. We moved around the same house like two ghosts, polite, careful, broken. He tried to give me space. I could hear him crying some nights when he thought I was asleep. And the worst part? I still loved him. That's what hurt the most. That after all the lies, after the betrayal, my heart still missed him. One afternoon, I drove back to Anna's house. She looked surprised to see me, but this time, she didn't look afraid. "I'm not here to fight," I said softly. "I just need to understand." She nodded and invited me in. Her home was warm and cozy, family photos on the walls, the smell of cookies in the air. It was the kind of home I'd always imagined for us once. We sat in her kitchen, and she poured coffee into 2 mismatched mugs. "I'm sorry you found out like that," she said quietly. "You didn't deserve to be lied to." "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "You could have reached out." She sighed. "Because it wasn't my place. Mark made his choice. I made mine. I wanted a normal life for my son. I didn't want to destroy yours." She looked at me then, eyes tired but kind. "You know, he's been good about the money. He's never missed a payment. But I can tell he's been carrying guilt all these years. I think he really does love you." Her words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. I didn't know what to say. I just sat there, staring into my coffee, trying to make sense of everything. When I left her house, she walked me to the car. The little boy, Jamie, waved from the window. He had Mark's eyes, Mark's smile, and my heart cracked all over again. On the drive home, I cried, deep, painful sobs that shook me from the inside out. I cried for the life I thought I had, for the woman who lived in silence all those years, for the man who tried to build 2 worlds and failed both, and for the boy who didn't ask for any of it. That night, Mark was waiting when I got home. He looked terrified. "Did you go see her?" he asked. "Yes," I said simply. I used to think forgiveness meant pretending nothing happened, smiling, moving on, acting like the past didn't exist. But when everything fell apart, I learned something very different. Forgiveness isn't about erasing the pain. It's about living through it, without letting it poison the rest of your life. The months after the truth came out were the hardest of my life. Mark and I didn't separate, but we might as well have. We were 2 people living in the same house, trying to rebuild something that had already burned down. There were moments of kindness, a cup of coffee left by my side in the morning, a quiet good night at the end of the day. But there was also distance, a wall made of words we hadn't yet found the courage to say. I threw myself into work. I'm a nurse, and in those days, the hospital became my refuge. There's something comforting about taking care of others when you can't fix yourself. Each shift, I'd hold a patient's hand, listen to their stories, and for a few hours, my own pain felt smaller. But the moment I clocked out, it all came rushing back. The betrayal, the lies, the face of that little boy, who had my husband's eyes. One evening after work, I parked outside the house and just sat in the car, staring at the porch light. Mark had left it on for me. He always did, even now. For some reason, that tiny light made me cry, because even after everything, he still cared. And I hated that part of me still cared too. I started therapy soon after. I'd never gone before, thought it was something other people needed. But I realized I was drowning quietly, and I needed someone to throw me a rope. My therapist, Dr. Jacobs, was this calm, silver-haired woman who spoke softly but never sugar-coated the truth. After I told her everything, she said, "Laura, what hurts you the most? His betrayal, or the years you didn't trust your own intuition?" That question cut deep, because she was right. I knew something was wrong for years, but I'd silenced that voice inside me, the one whispering that love shouldn't feel confusing, that trust shouldn't feel like guessing. I cried through most of that first session, but when I walked out, I felt lighter. For the first time, I wasn't just a wife who'd been lied to. I was a woman trying to find her way back to herself. Around that same time, Mark asked if I wanted to join him on his Saturday morning walks again. We used to walk the same trail every weekend, before everything. It was our ritual: coffee, sneakers, and an hour just talking about life. The thought of going back there made my chest tighten, but something in me said, "Try." So I did. The first few walks were quiet. We barely spoke. But then one morning, as the sun came up through the trees, Mark said softly, "You know, I never realized how lucky I was until I almost lost you." I didn't answer right away. I just kept walking, listening to the crunch of gravel under our feet. Finally, I said, "Then don't waste it this time." He nodded, and for the first time in a long time, I believed he meant it. A few weeks later, Anna called. "I wanted to let you know," she said. "Jamie's birthday is next weekend. He asked if you could come." I froze. Me? At the birthday party of the child who represented everything that broke my heart? But then I thought of Jamie's smile. Innocent, unaware. None of this was his fault. So I said yes. The day of the party, I stood outside Anna's house, clutching a wrapped Lego set in my hands. When the door opened, Jamie's face lit up. "You came!" he shouted, running to hug me. And just like that, the heaviness I'd carried for months cracked open. He wasn't my husband's secret anymore. He was just a little boy who deserved love. Anna smiled. "Thank you for coming." It means a lot inside. Mark was already there, helping set up decorations. When he saw me, surprise flashed across his face, followed by quiet gratitude. We didn't talk much, but we didn't need to. For that one afternoon, everything felt human, messy, imperfect, but real. That night, after we got home, Mark poured 2 glasses of wine. He sat across from me at the table, looking nervous. "I want to tell Jamie the truth someday," he said. "When he's older. I don't want him to grow up thinking lies are love." I nodded slowly. "Good. He deserves that." Then I looked at him. We all do. Months turned into a year. The pain dulled, though it never fully disappeared. But it became something else, a reminder of how far we'd come. Mark started volunteering at a youth center, trying to make up for lost time in his own way. I began painting again, something I hadn't done since college. Funny how heartbreak can wake up the parts of you that went silent long ago. One afternoon, while I was painting in the sunroom, Mark walked in quietly. He stood behind me for a moment, watching. Then he said, "You look happy when you do that." I smiled. I think I'm finally learning how to be. It's strange, the things you learn after your world falls apart. I used to believe marriage was about forever. Now I know it's about showing up, even after you've failed each other. I used to think forgiveness was a gift you gave someone else. but it's really the gift you give yourself, so you can stop bleeding from old wounds. And I used to think love meant never being hurt. Now I know, sometimes love is choosing to stay open, even after you've been broken. Last month, Mark and I visited Anna and Jamie again. Jamie's taller now, missing one of his front teeth. He ran to me, holding up a school project about family. He said proudly, "I put you in it too." Tears filled my eyes as I hugged him. Later that night, as we drove home, I rested my head against the window and whispered, "I forgive you." Mark didn't say anything. He just reached for my hand and held it quietly, like he was afraid to break the moment. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like we were pretending. We were just human, flawed, healing, still here. Looking back now, I realized the real story wasn't about betrayal. It was about becoming whole again. Because sometimes life will shatter everything you thought you knew. Not to destroy you, but to rebuild you into someone stronger, someone softer, someone finally free. I'm not the same woman I was before I met Anna. I'm better, because I learned the difference between pain and punishment, between anger and truth, between love and dependence. And most of all, I learned that forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's remembering without fear. It's funny how quiet healing can be. No fireworks, no dramatic music, just small moments that feel ordinary until one day you realize you don't wake up in pain anymore. That's what it was like for me. One morning, I just felt different. Not like the woman who discovered her husband's secret. Not like the one who cried herself to sleep for months. Just me. Laura Bennett, 42 years old, survivor of heartbreak, and somehow still capable of love. I remember standing in the kitchen that morning, pouring coffee, sunlight streaming through the window. Mark walked in, his hair messy, still half asleep. He smiled at me, not the nervous, cautious smile I'd gotten used to after everything, but a real one. Warm, familiar. "Morning," he said softly. "Morning," I replied. It was simple, but it felt like the start of something new. That same week, I took a day off work and drove to the ocean. It was early spring, the kind of day where the air still carried a chill, but the sun had a quiet warmth. I kicked off my shoes and stood with my feet in the sand, staring out at the waves. For the first time in years, I felt still. No questions, no what-ifs, no bitterness, just peace, because I finally understood. Forgiveness isn't about who deserves it. It's about who needs it to move forward, and I needed it. Mark and I started going to couples therapy not long after that. It wasn't easy, sitting there, pulling apart every lie, every wound, every silence we'd built our marriage on. It was like opening a scar over and over again. But the more honest we became, the lighter it got. We learned to listen again, to ask questions without attacking, to speak truth even when it hurt. Sometimes we'd leave those sessions emotionally drained, sitting in the car in silence for minutes before driving home. But there was healing in that silence, a shared understanding that love doesn't survive on perfection, it survives on effort. One night, a few months later, Mark came home late. He found me on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars. He sat beside me quietly. After a while, he said, "You know, I keep waiting for you to hate me." I looked at him. I did. For a while, he nodded, looking down. "I don't blame you." "But then," I continued, "I realized hating you kept me tied to the worst part of my life. I didn't want that to be my story forever." He turned to me, his eyes glassy. "And now?" "Now," I said, "I just want to live again." We sat there a long time, holding hands under the stars, saying nothing. And in that silence, I realized we were both trying, not to go back to who we were, but to become something new, something honest, something real. A year after everything came out, Anna invited us over again, this time for Thanksgiving. It was strange at first, being in the same room together, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. Jamie ran around the living room in superhero pajamas, laughing so hard he could barely breathe. When he tripped and scraped his knee, both Mark and I rushed over at the same time. Mark picked him up, brushing off the dirt, and I handed him a Band-Aid from my purse. Anna smiled quietly. "He's lucky," she said. "He's got more people who love him than he knows." I smiled back. So are we. That night, driving home, I looked out the window at the falling snow and thought about how different life had become. Not easier, not cleaner, just truer. The kind of truth that doesn't always make you happy, but gives you peace. Sometimes I still think about the day I first met Anna, standing on her porch, shaking, realizing my marriage was built on a lie. If I could go back and talk to that version of me, I'd tell her this: you're going to be okay. You'll cry, yes. You'll break, absolutely. But someday, you'll wake up, and your heart will be soft again. Not because you forgot, but because you chose to keep loving anyway. Because that's what real strength looks like. Not revenge, not bitterness, but grace. A few months later, I decided to write about everything that happened. Not to expose Mark or to make anyone a villain, but to tell the truth. So maybe another woman out there, sitting in her car crying over a secret she never wanted to find, would know she wasn't alone. I posted it online, anonymously of course, under the title, "Every month my husband sent money to his sister." I didn't expect much, but within days, thousands of people had read it. Some called me brave, some said I was a fool for forgiving him, but one comment stayed with me. It said, "Forgiveness doesn't mean weakness. It means you decided to stop carrying pain that wasn't yours anymore." I printed that comment and taped it to my mirror, because that's exactly what I'd done. Life isn't perfect now. It never will be. There are still moments, little triggers, when a song, a word, or a look brings it all rushing back. But now I breathe through it. Because pain may visit, but it doesn't live here anymore. Last weekend, Mark and I celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary. We didn't throw a big party. We just drove out to the same ocean where I once stood alone, feet in the sand, staring at the horizon. This time, he was beside me. We walked quietly for a while, hand in hand. Then he said, "Thank you for staying." I smiled, tears in my eyes. "Thank you for finally showing up." He laughed softly. "Guess we're both slow learners." "Maybe," I said, "but at least we learned." As the sun set over the water, I thought about everything that brought me to that moment. The lies, the heartbreak, the forgiveness, the healing. And I realized something beautiful. This wasn't the ending of our story. It was the beginning of a new one. Because sometimes, love isn't about holding on to what was. It's about creating something better out of what's left. Now, when people ask if I ever truly forgave him, I tell them this: yes, but not because he deserved it. Because I did. Because forgiveness is freedom. And when I look at my life now, peaceful, imperfect, but full of truth, I know that freedom was worth everything it cost. End of part 4, approximately 1,850 words. It's strange how, after a storm, you start noticing little things again, like the sound of birds outside your window or the smell of coffee brewing in the morning. I used to take those things for granted. Now, they feel like proof that I survived. After everything came out, I realized how much of my life had revolved around being Mark's wife. The woman behind the man, the quiet organizer, the one who made things work while he made the money, the one who smiled at dinner parties and ignored the loneliness building in the corners of our marriage. But now, I wanted something else. I wanted to know who Laura Bennett was, outside of love, outside of pain. So I started small. I signed up for a local writing class at the community center. It felt silly at first. A room full of strangers, most of them half my age, sitting in plastic chairs under buzzing fluorescent lights. But when the instructor asked us to write a story about a moment that changed everything, I knew exactly where to start. The words poured out of me like water breaking through a dam. By the time I looked up, everyone else had stopped writing. The instructor was watching me, a soft smile on her face. "Looks like you found your moment," she said. I nodded, breathless. Yeah, I guess I did. That class became my escape. Every Tuesday night, I'd leave the house, notebook in hand, and disappear into a world where my voice finally mattered again. I wrote about grief, forgiveness, love, and the quiet courage it takes to start over. And for the first time in years, I didn't care who read it. It was mine. At home, things with Mark were better. Not perfect. Maybe they never would be, but softer. We'd learned to communicate, to pause before reacting, to ask instead of assuming. But I also started noticing how much I'd changed. I didn't wait for his approval anymore. I didn't ask permission to take space or make choices for myself. And surprisingly, he didn't try to stop me. He'd say, "You're glowing lately," and I'd smile, because I knew it wasn't glow, it was freedom. One afternoon, Anna called me. It had been months since Thanksgiving, and our relationship had settled into something gentle, respectful, but not forced. "Hey," she said, her voice cautious, "Jamie's having a birthday party next week. I'd love for you to come." I hesitated. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" She laughed softly. "Laura, he still talks about the lady who fixed his knee with the magic Band-Aid. You kind of have a fan that made me smile. Then I'll be there." The day of the party, I showed up with a bag full of gifts, books, puzzles, a toy plane I thought he'd love. Jamie ran up to me, his little arms wrapping around my legs. "You came." I knelt to hug him. "Of course I did." "I wouldn't miss it." Anna came over, wiping frosting off her hands. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. I nodded. "Thank you for inviting me." We stood there for a moment, two women connected by the same man, but no longer divided by him. And in that moment, I realized, forgiveness doesn't erase pain, it just stops it from controlling you. Later that evening, when the kids had gone home and the house was quiet again, Anna and I sat at her kitchen table. She poured us both a glass of wine. "I wanted to say something," she began. "I never meant to hurt you, Laura. Not with Mark, not with the money. I was desperate. I thought I was doing the right thing. I know," I said softly. "I believe you." She looked surprised. "You do?" "Yes. Because if I hadn't lived through it, I might have done the same thing. We all make choices out of love, even the wrong ones." Anna's eyes filled with tears. "You're kinder than I deserve." I shook my head. "No. I just got tired of carrying anger that night, driving home. I felt lighter than I had in years. It wasn't just about forgiving Mark anymore. It was about forgiving myself, for missing the signs, for staying too long, for letting someone else's choices define my worth. I wasn't that woman anymore. Over the next few months, life found a new rhythm. I published my first personal essay online, a piece about rebuilding trust after betrayal. To my surprise, it went viral. Messages started pouring in. Women from all over the country wrote to me, some heartbroken, some healing, saying my words had given them strength. One woman wrote, "You made me realize that forgiveness isn't surrender. It's survival." I cried reading that. Because it was true. Mark supported me through it all. He'd proofread my drafts, make dinner when I stayed up late writing, and never once tried to take credit for my healing. One night, he said, "You've become someone incredible, Laura." I smiled. I think she was always there. She just needed room to breathe. He nodded. "I'm glad I get to know her." And for the first time, I believed him. A year later, My writing turned into something bigger. A small publisher reached out, asking if I'd ever considered turning my essays into a book. The title they loved? Every month, my husband sent money to his sister, until the day I met her. The story that once shattered me had now become my redemption. When the first printed copy arrived in the mail, I held it in my hands and cried. Not because it was perfect, but because it was proof. Proof that pain can build something beautiful if you let it. The night before the book launch, I went out for a walk. The town was quiet, the air crisp. I stopped by the old oak tree at the end of our street, the one Mark and I used to pass on our evening walks before everything fell apart. I ran my hand along its rough bark and whispered, "Thank you." Not to the tree, not even to God, though maybe he was listening, but to the universe for breaking me in just the right way to rebuild me better. At the launch event, the small bookstore was packed. People I'd never met before came up to me, thanking me for telling their story. Anna came too, with Jamie holding her hand. He ran up to me, waving a crumpled copy of my book. "Look, my name's in the back." I laughed. "Yes, it is, buddy. You're the reason this all turned out okay." Mark stood in the back, smiling quietly, pride and humility written all over his face. When it was over, he walked up, holding a bouquet of white lilies, my favorite. "For you," he said softly. "Thank you," I whispered. We didn't need to say anything else. That night, as I sat on the couch flipping through my own book, I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who believed her world ended the day she found out about his sister. If only she could see me now, not perfect, not unscarred, but whole. Because sometimes life doesn't give you closure. It gives you a second chance to write your own ending. And that's what I did. Now, every month when Mark transfers money to Anna, yes, he still does, I smile. Because now I know where it's going. To Jamie's school, to Anna's small business, to a family built on honesty, not lies. And every time he hits send, he looks at me and says, "This time, no secrets." And I nod. This time, no secrets. Maybe forgiveness doesn't mean everything goes back to how it was. Maybe it just means you choose peace over pain, love over anger, truth over pride. And maybe, just maybe, that's what real love is supposed to look like. Because I used to think our story ended the day I met his sister. But now I see, that was only the beginning of mine. It's been 2 years since the book came out. 2 years since I put the worst chapter of my life into words and somehow turned it into something beautiful. But healing, I've learned, isn't a straight line. It's a spiral. And sometimes you find yourself walking past the same pain again, just from a higher place. That's what happened the day I got the call. It was a Tuesday morning. I was sitting at my kitchen table, laptop open, working on my next essay. This one about learning to trust yourself again. When my phone rang, I almost didn't answer, but the number looked familiar. "Hello?" I said. A woman's voice replied, shaky and low. "Hi, is this Laura Bennett?" "Yes." "This is Dr. Shaw from Mercy Hospital. I'm calling about Anna Miller. You're listed as her emergency contact for a moment." I couldn't breathe. "Emergency contact?" I repeated. Yes, what happened?" "She was in a car accident. She's stable, but she asked for you." I froze. Anna, the woman who had once been at the center of my heartbreak, and now she wanted me. I don't remember the drive to the hospital, just flashes, the sound of my heartbeat, the blur of traffic lights, the feeling of my hands gripping the steering wheel too tight. When I reached her room, she was pale, hooked to monitors, her leg in a cast. Her eyes opened when she heard the door. "Laura," she whispered. "Hey," I said softly, pulling a chair closer. "You really know how to scare people, huh?" She gave a weak laugh. "Guess I wanted some attention." We talked for hours. She told me she'd been driving home from work when a truck ran a red light. She was lucky, the doctors said. If the car had been hit a few inches closer to the driver's side, she wouldn't be here. When she finished, she looked at me, her voice trembling. I didn't know who else to call. I smiled gently. You made the right choice. She started to cry then, quietly, helplessly. And without thinking, I reached for her hand. Because that's what forgiveness does. It doesn't erase the past, but it softens your response to it. Over the next few days, I visited her every afternoon. I brought her flowers, helped her brush her hair, even painted her nails when she was feeling low. The nurses started calling us the sisters who made peace. One of them asked, "How long have you two known each other?" Anna smiled faintly. "Feels like forever." I smiled back. In a way, it has been. Jamie came to see his mom one weekend. He'd grown taller, his hair messier, his smile still just as bright. When he saw me, he ran into my arms. "Mom said you helped her." I hugged him tight. "She's strong, buddy. She's gonna be fine." He looked up at me seriously. "You're like family now." I swallowed hard. I guess we kind of are. When Anna was finally discharged, Mark and I helped her get settled back home. Watching him carry her bags inside felt surreal. The man who once lied about this woman was now helping her heal. Not because he had to, but because he'd changed. He turned to me that night as we left her house and said, "I don't think I'll ever forgive myself for how it started, but I'm grateful for how it turned out." I nodded. Me too. Life somehow found its rhythm again. Anna recovered fully over the next few months. Jamie started middle school, and I went on my first book tour, small-town libraries, women's conferences, and podcasts. At one event in Chicago, a young woman stood up during the Q&A and asked, "How did you really forgive them? Like, how do you let go of something like that?" The whole room went silent. I thought about it for a long moment, then said, "You don't forgive all at once. You forgive in pieces. One conversation, one tear, one deep breath at a time, until one day you realize the weight is gone. And it's not because they changed, it's because you did." The room erupted in quiet applause. Afterward, the young woman came up to hug me. She whispered, "I think I can try now." And that's when I realized, maybe that's why I went through all of it, so someone else wouldn't have to feel alone in their pain. Months passed. My book hit bestseller lists. I was invited to speak at a TED-style event called The Power of Forgiveness. Standing on that stage, looking out at hundreds of faces, I started my talk with a story they didn't expect. "I used to think forgiveness meant weakness," I began. "That if I forgave my husband for lying to me, or the woman he lied about, it meant I was letting them off the hook. But I learned something different. Forgiveness isn't letting someone else off the hook. It's letting yourself off the chain." You could hear a pin drop. I told them about Anna, about Mark, about the accident, about how life gave me a second chance to choose love over resentment. When I finished, people stood and clapped. Some were crying, and all I could think was, this is what healing looks like. That night, after the event, I checked my phone and found a message from Anna. "I watched your talk. You were amazing. I wanted you to know something. I met someone. He's kind, honest, and he loves Jamie. You were right, Laura. There is life after heartbreak." I smiled, tears welling up. "I'm so happy for you," I texted back. "You deserve that." And I meant it, every word. The following spring, Anna invited us to her wedding. It was small, just close friends and family, held in a sunlit garden with white roses everywhere. When she saw me arrive, she ran up and hugged me. "You came." "Of course," I said, laughing. "I wouldn't miss it." Jamie stood beside her in a little suit, proud as ever. Mark joined me a few minutes later, taking my hand as the ceremony began. When Anna and her new husband exchanged vows, I felt something warm and unfamiliar bloom in my chest. Not jealousy, not regret, just peace. Because this, all of it, was proof that love doesn't always end the way you think it will. Sometimes it just finds a different form. After the ceremony, Anna came over to where I was sitting. She took my hands in hers and said, "You changed my life, Laura." I'll never forget that I shook my head. "No, you changed mine too. We just grew through each other." She smiled. "Maybe that's what forgiveness really is, growing through the pain together." I smiled back. "Exactly." Later that evening, Mark and I danced together under the fairy lights. The music was soft, the air smelled like roses, and for the first time, I felt like everything had come full circle. He leaned in and whispered, "You ever think about how far we've come?" I nodded. "Every day." He smiled. "I don't deserve you." I looked into his eyes. "Maybe not. But you've worked for me, and that's enough." He laughed quietly, pulling me closer. "I love you, Laura." "I know," I said, smiling. "I love you too." That night, as we drove home, the city lights shimmering in the distance, I thought about everything that had happened. The lies, the heartbreak, the healing, the new beginnings. And I realized something profound. Forgiveness doesn't end with peace. It ends with gratitude. Because when you've walked through fire and come out whole, you stop wishing life were easier. You just thank God you survived. Now, years later, when I look back, I don't see betrayal anymore. I see becoming. The woman who once cried over secrets is now standing tall in her truth. The man who once lied out of fear learned to love with honesty. And the woman who once felt like my enemy became my friend. Life didn't give me the story I wanted, but it gave me the one I needed. And for that, I'll always be grateful. Because in the end, forgiveness wasn't just something I gave, it was something I became. It's been 10 years. 10 years since that morning in my kitchen when I opened the bank statement that changed everything. 10 years since his sister stopped being a secret and became a real person, a part of my story, my family, my forgiveness. Sometimes I still wake up in disbelief at how far life has carried me. A quiet life. These days, Mark and I live in a small house near the sea. Nothing fancy. White shutters, a porch swing that creaks when the wind blows. The kind of home that smells like coffee and ocean salt and something warm baking in the oven. Mark runs a small woodworking shop now. He builds tables and toy planes, and sometimes, when he thinks I'm not looking, he carves our initials on the underside of each piece. And me? I still write. My second book, Letters to the Woman I Was, came out last spring. It's quieter than the first one, softer. Not about betrayal this time, but about becoming whole. People still write to me. Some ask how I knew it was time to forgive. Others ask if I ever regretted staying. The truth is, I don't. Because staying wasn't about weakness. It was about choice. I chose to rebuild, brick by fragile brick, until the ruins became a home again. Anna and her husband David live 2 hours away now. She runs a small bakery that smells like heaven. Every Christmas, she sends us boxes of cinnamon rolls tied with red ribbon, and every year she writes the same note. For the woman who taught me how to start over. Sometimes I visit her shop. I sit by the window, sip coffee, and watch her laugh with customers. If someone had told me years ago that we'd end up here, 2 women bound not by pain but by friendship, I would have never believed it. But life has a strange sense of poetry. Jamie is 16 now, taller than both of us, kind, curious, a good kid. He calls me Aunt Laura. When he got accepted into a summer writing camp, he sent me the email with the subject line, "Guess who's following in your footsteps?" I cried. Of course I did. The letter A few months ago, while cleaning out old boxes in the attic, I found something I hadn't seen in years, the notebook from that first writing class, the one where I wrote about the moment that changed everything. Tucked inside was a folded piece of paper, a letter in Mark's handwriting. I must have missed it all these years. It read, "Laura, if you ever find this, It means I never found the right way to say what I feel. I know what I did broke something sacred. I can't undo it, but I can spend the rest of my life building something better. If you decide to leave, I'll understand. If you decide to stay, I'll spend every day earning the air beside you. Either way, thank you for teaching me what love really is. Mark. I sat there for a long time, holding that letter, the ink slightly faded, but the words still alive. I remembered the nights I thought love had died, the mornings I thought I'd never trust again. And here I was, not broken, not bitter, just whole. So I wrote back, not to give him, but for me. Mark, you did break something, but we both built it again, stronger than before. You taught me that honesty is not about never falling. It's about standing back up and saying, this is who I am. Thank you for choosing to stand beside me, again and again. I slipped both letters into a small wooden box and placed it on our bookshelf. Our past, tucked safely away, not forgotten, not erased, just honored. Speaking again. Last month, I was invited to give another talk, this time at a women's retreat on the coast. The theme was starting over. When I walked onto that small stage, I didn't read from my book. I spoke from the heart. I used to think forgiveness was a finish line, I said. But it's really a rhythm, a heartbeat that keeps you soft when the world tells you to harden. I looked out at the faces, women of every age, some smiling, some wiping tears, and I realized how connected we all were by our broken pieces. At the end of the talk, a woman my mother's age came up and took my hands. I lost my husband 20 years ago, she said, not to death, to pride. I never forgave him. Maybe it's time I squeezed her hands. It's never too late. Home that night, back home, I sat on the porch swing watching the moon. Mark came out with 2 mugs of cocoa. He handed me one and sat beside me. Good talk? He asked. I smiled. The best. We sat there in silence for a while, listening to the waves crash in the distance. Finally, he said, you ever think about how different things could have been if you hadn't come to that house that day? I laughed softly. Every now and then. And I'm glad I did. Because that day broke me open, but it also let the light in. He nodded slowly. You always find the poetry in pain. Someone has to, I said, smiling. The bench. There's a park near our house, right by the cliffs overlooking the ocean. Every morning, I walk there with a notebook and pen. There's a bench with a little brass plaque that says, for those who learned that endings are just beginnings in disguise. I wrote that line myself and donated the bench last year. People sit there to read, cry, hold hands, or just breathe. Sometimes strangers recognize me and stop to talk. They share their stories, infidelity, loss, heartbreak. And they always ask the same question. How do you move on? I tell them, you don't move on. You move through. Slowly, bravely, one honest step at a time. A letter to you. If you're listening to this story right now, maybe you're standing at your own crossroads, wondering whether to stay, to go, to forgive, to begin again. Here's what I've learned. You are stronger than the worst thing that ever happened to you. You can love again, even if the first version of love broke you. You can forgive, not because they deserve it, but because you do. And one day, you'll wake up, make coffee, look out at the sunrise, and realize you're free. Not because the past disappeared, but because you finally stopped carrying it. 10 years later. Today, I sit at my desk, sunlight spilling across the pages of my journal. Outside, Mark is sanding a piece of oak for a new table. He looks up, catches me watching him, and grins. What are you writing about this time? He calls out. I smile. Us. But don't worry, this one's a love story. He laughs, shaking his head. Took us long enough to get there. Yeah, I say softly, but it was worth it. The truth. Here's the truth no one tells you about forgiveness. It doesn't make you holy. It doesn't erase the hurt. It just gives you back your life. And if you let it, it'll turn the ashes of your story into something beautiful, something that can light the way for someone else. Because somewhere out there, another woman is sitting in her kitchen right now, staring at a secret she never asked for, wondering if her world just ended. And I want her to know, it didn't. It's just beginning. It's strange how one moment, one truth, can shatter everything you thought you knew, and yet, somehow, it can rebuild you too. When I first met her, I thought it was the end of my marriage. But what I didn't realize was that it was the beginning of my healing. I didn't forgive Mark because it was easy. I forgave him because I couldn't carry the weight of anger anymore. Because sometimes forgiveness isn't about them. It's about freeing yourself. Soft pause. Distant ocean sound fades in. Today, when I look at my life, my husband, our small home by the sea, and the peace that finally found me, I don't see betrayal anymore. I see a woman who walked through the fire and came out whole. Music softens, emotional piano keys linger. If my story finds you in a moment of heartbreak, please remember this: you are stronger than your pain, and one day your story will help someone else find their strength too. Soft breath, almost a whisper. This was my truth, my forgiveness, my freedom. Piano fades out completely. Thank you for listening. If my story touched your heart, don't forget to share it, so maybe it can touch someone else's too.